So this week we begin the second book of the Torah, Sefer Shemot, which is titled Exodus in the common parlance, but in Jewish tradition is referred to as Sefer HaGeula, a book of redemption. And we'll pick that up as a theme soon. And it gives us a chance now, starting a new book of the Torah, to clear the boards a bit, clear our minds, put aside some of the preconceived notions we may have, and to consider things. And the title of this class is Small Stuff. And I want to just reference something. You know, when you think of Hollywood, looking at the second book of the Torah, so a very famous, groundbreaking film is the Ten Commandments, and full of drama. And that's the nature of Hollywood in general. Whenever they pick up somebody's life story or any event in the world, their idea is to magnify the drama and the impact. You know, and then you go to Universal Studios and you see this little setup, how they filmed the splitting of the sea in 1956. They have this little pool of water that comes down and it divides in half, and they use that as the backdrop, and they can film this huge, huge spectacle. And then, of course, there are spectacle moments in the book of Shemot. You know, we do stand at Har Sinai which is a turning point in world history, and we get there from here, from the beginning of the book. That's all true. But I want to tune into something that is small stuff, and to understand why it does matter so much from the Jewish perspective, because we know that there's a gap between the way normal people see the world and Hollywood sees the world, and between the way the Jewish people see the world and the way other people see the world. So we're going to try to focus in on that. And also it'll give us the opportunity to relate to these ginormous events like Matan Torah, like the revelation at Sinai, how it really applies to the way we live our everyday lives, you know, in some of our cases, slushing through the snow, in other cases, not being too distracted by the palm trees, depending on where you live and what your context is. But we live our lives in a day-by-day basis, no matter who we are. You know, the old saying, even he puts his pants on one leg at a time, you know, and I guess for the privileged people of the world, as they say, he has someone putting on his pants one leg at a time. So no matter what status a person's at, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what privilege you may enjoy, there is a reality to everyday living that I want to address and speak to in this class. And that's the title, Small Stuff, you know, and how we get to really the big places. And I just tell you in general, I remember very often people giving me advice. And advice would be, typical advice, you get a job running a school, and people say to you things like, be strategic, don't be tactical. You're a leader now, so your job is to have a vision, think about grand things, and don't be tactical. Don't be the kind of person who reacts to what's right in front of you. And I want to challenge that advice by looking at this week's Torah reading. And I also want to refer to another idea that's out there now, which is called small victories. I don't know if you've read about this or not. I became aware of it just in terms of reading some recent biographies. But there's a view of the world, which is that the most important thing a person can do to start their day, of course, for us, it's open your eyes, thank God, modeh ani lefanecha, that your soul has been returned to you, and that your life has been restored, and that God has once again entrusted you with an eternal soul. That's the way we think of waking up in the morning. But the advice you'll see in this small steps, small victories approach to life is get up in the morning and make your bed. That if you make your bed and you start things off in the right way, with an orderliness and an organized way, and you take upon yourself a responsibility to modify the surroundings around you, that's the best thing you can do. So let's see what the Torah has to say about all this. That's what I want to look at. And I want to begin with a reference to Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot, and this is something I heard discussed last week by Rav Luchter from Israel. Pirkei Avot, the 5th chapter of Pirkei Avot, begins by telling us that in 10 statements God created everything. Basara ma'amoros, Nivra ha'olam. And the Mishnah promptly asks a question, why 10? God could have created in one, could have created in 1,000. But without getting into the specific number 10, which has a lot of significance, not just to us, the Jewish people, but to the world at large. I was part of the experiment of doing away with base 10 in terms of math, in terms of getting rid of the computers, but the world in general thinks and operates on a base 10 approach. But in any event, the Mishnah answers very profoundly that God chose to create the world with 10 ma'amoros, with 10 statements, in order to raise the ante, both for the wicked and for the righteous. And the words of the Mishnah at the end are, why? Ma Talmud Lomar, what does it teach us? V'litain schar tov l'tzadikim shemekaymin es ha'olam, to give proper reward to the righteous, and the word mekaymin, who fulfill the world. And that's so, hence God says, so when each of us acknowledge God in whatever way we do so, fulfilling a mitzvah, refraining from violating the Torah, doing kindness to someone else, myriad ways of visiting the sick, all the different aspects of Torah that we know. When a person does this, they're fulfilling the world, mekaymin es ha'olam, and it's given special magnification because it was created in 10 statements. Okay, that's the concept of the Mishnah. And what Rav Luchter honed in on, I think it's a very profound idea, is that this Mishnah dramatizes to us the extent to which the everyday choices we make in our lives have importance to God and to the universe that God created. In other words, God, as the concept that we understand, is that God wanted to bestow kindness and wanted to give each and every soul an opportunity to achieve reward through closeness to God. So what mechanism did God set up for that? So God set up a mechanism we call bechira chofshis, a free choice. And we exercise free choice not in a particularly dramatic way, but in these small victories type of an approach. Making your bed, or certainly if you're a kid living at home and you're making your bed so your mother doesn't have to make your bed, or perhaps you have consideration for your spouse so your spouse doesn't have to make your bed. That's a big thing right away. That shows consideration for others. It also shows in the sense of this Mishnah that these everyday choices we make is what fulfills the world. And in the Hasidic way of putting it, the Sfas Emes, major Hasidic thinker of the world, says that the word mekaymin doesn't mean fulfill, but it means it validates the world. We have this statement in the Gemara called kiyum shtaros, right? Kiyum shtaros. If a guy creates a document, someone needs to validate it. You have to have witnesses who can sign their names and people who can recognize that. You go to a wedding or a marriage, we call up witnesses to witness what's going on. It's fine. It's good. Discussion is fine. So all that's part of it. So look what the Sfas Emes says. So Sfas Emes is saying that this Mishnah is showing us that all of creation, God's master plan to create a universe and to create human beings to begin with, becomes validated through what we choose to do, what you choose to do, what I choose to do every day. So it's not just the moment of revelation at Sinai with the thunder and the lightning and the mountain ablaze that fulfills the purpose of the world. And that certainly was a moment that we try to capture and keep with us. But it's every day we are being mekayim. We are validating God's creation through the choices we make. So I'm going to take a look at this week's Torah, reading the first parsha in the book of Shemot, which is called Shemot. And I want to just run through it. I'm going to run through, I don't run through it, but go through it. I want to highlight 10 points, if I can remember all 10 of them, and just to illustrate how this is true. So how does the second book of the Torah begin? Ve'elu Shemot b'nei Yisrael al bo'im Mitzrayma, Eit Yaakov ishu beito bo, these are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt with Jacob, each man in his household, and then it names the people, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Okay, so first of all, what an emphasis on individuals. Here we're talking about, as I thought in many ways, that the Torah now is moving on from the individual lives of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and his wives, and now it's globalizing to Bnei Yisrael, to a nation. But then right away the Torah says, names them. It names the people. We don't need them to be named. We heard these names over and over and over again. Even at the end of the book of Genesis, we went through all these names and the individual blessings given to each one. So what is the Torah doing here? So I want to suggest to us that the Torah is putting forward this idea for us that ultimately the world is validated and fulfilled through what we do as individuals. So in a certain sense, we could write our own names into the beginning of this book of the Torah. Put your name in there. Very famously, Rabbi Sachs wrote a book once, A Letter in the Scroll, how every person represents a letter in the Sefer Torah itself. There's a medrash to that effect. But here we could literally say that. And the other thing that Rabbi Shamshon Raphael Hirsch emphasizes, where it says, Es Yaakov ish ubeito bo'u. Now, it's each family, each household was connected directly to Yaakov, to the forefathers and the legacy of the Jewish people. So when you look out, and we can have this at the end, much further down in the Torah, when Bilam, the evil prophet, looks out on the Jewish people, what does he say? He says, Matovu oholecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents. He didn't say, wow, a couple million people, big city, where's the skyscrapers, where's the evidence of great progress? No, he said, look at these tents. And again, look what the emphasis is on. The emphasis is on us living individual lives, having children, raising children, working within family units as individuals, and then that collectively becomes Bnei Israel. And we should never lose sight of that small, focused picture of what we are deciding every day. And thank God, with the Torah and as Jewish people, we have bigger fish to fry every day than just making our beds or earning our livelihood. We have spiritual, social, character-based issues that we're dealing with every day of our lives, and that's how we build up the world. Next thing, we encounter the mialdot, the two what's the word? Mialdot, women who bring people into the world. What's the correct word?
Midwife.
What? Midwives. Okay, great. Sorry. All I could think about was nursemaids, and I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Yeah, something I'm learning in the daytime and having to do with a different topic. Who the mialdot? They're two individual people. And what does the Torah say about them twice? It doesn't say, wow, they stood up. What do we put it? They were individuals speaking to power. I think that's the big hot phrase that we use nowadays. Stood up, like the guy who stood up in front of the tank, in TMM Square and then gets run over, but at least he stood there and held his ground. No, the Torah says these were individuals who had fear of God, and fear of God means cognizance of their responsibility to act in a manner that validates the world. We're going to stay with this idea. And what's the outcome of their heroic validation? It says they were blessed with houses. Again, circling back to this idea of Ishu Beito Bo. Each one had a household. They became the mothers of prominent households amongst the Jewish people. What greater reward can a person have than to see that become part and parcel of the whole future of human history, of Jewish history? The next thing we encounter, we look at Moshe. And I'll just mention on the side, beside Moshe himself, the fact that the Torah stresses that his parents, in the face of Paro's decree, chose to remarry and to bring a child into the world. Again, a micro decision, a personal decision, okay? One that didn't even have to be mentioned really, because there were two older siblings already were born. The Torah goes out of its way to inform us that in spite of Pharaoh's immense decrees against the future of the Jewish people, they decided to bring children into the world. Something that happens every day, and that, when understood correctly, is a tremendous validation of the pain and process that God initiated by speaking 10 distinct utterances in order to create the world. Next, what does Moshe do? He notices the suffering of the people. And I could run through all the sentences with you, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to do that. But if you just look in any copy of the Chumash and look at Shemot, you'll see this. A small adder. He was in a privileged position. He saw past his own circumstances, and he became concerned about what was going on with the Jewish people. What does he do then? He kills the Egyptian who's killing the Jew. Now, that's not a strategic decision. That's not something which would capture headlines. Maybe he should have worked his way through diplomatically to become Paro's assistant of internal affairs, and he could have done more for the Jewish people. But that's not the way the Torah sees life working. He's confronted with a situation where he needs to intercede in order to save the life of an individual Jewish person. He does so. He acts that way. He's not saying this is a small matter. There are thousands of Jews suffering. I can't stop to take care of and protect one individual. He jumps in to do that. Next thing he does, sees two Jews fighting. Now, in the context of, just imagine a Holocaust-like experience. Imagine somebody in a concentration camp in Auschwitz taking the time to say, two Jews are arguing, let me intercede and make peace between the two of them, because it's a terrible thing when we have an argument within our family. It takes a ginormous focus of perspective, of individual responsibility, of placing value on individual choice, for Moshe to have done that. That's what the Torah tells us he does. These are the events that the Torah highlights for us. Next, he runs away. He is forced to run away. He comes to a far-off land. He intervenes again on behalf of the daughters of Yitro, who are being molested, attacked, harassed at the well there. Not his business. Didn't require him to get involved in that. He could have said, "Look, I've got big stuff in my mind. I'm escaping from a life-threatening situation." But when he encounters a situation and he knows that it's up to him to exercise his free choice that God has given him to intervene and make a situation better, Moshe does so. And this, of course, is the buildup to Moshe becoming the leader of the Jewish people, standing at the bush. What happens? How did he get to the burning bush? It says that Moshe noticed the bush burning, and he went, the sentence is very specific, he went to investigate and see what was going on. And midrashically, I think it's alluded to, that could be hundreds of people walked by that bush. Could be it was burning there for years or decades. And it only took a Moshe who said, there's a phenomenon going on in the world. What I choose to do at this minute is important, and I see something going on that requires my attention. I'm a busy shepherd. I got to make a living. I got a wife and kids to support. But no, Moshe goes and he tunes into this phenomenon. And of course, that was God's way of selecting who would be the ultimate redeemer of the Jewish people. It wasn't a grandiose test. It wasn't, who can charge into 100 tanks and try to save the nation. It was a simple idea of encountering a phenomenon and going in to understand it. And then we get to the really more nuanced moments in the Torah. For example, at the burning bush, when Moshe is arguing and says, send someone else, send someone else. And finally, even God gets angry with him and says, come on, how long are we going to sit here and debate what your responsibility is? Moshe makes a very harsh statement, and he says the words I didn't write down here, but he says, send anybody you want. I think it's chapter 4, sentence 13. In the interest of time, I'm not going to look it up here. Shlach no biati shlach. Send anybody but me. So it's an audacious thing because here I'm painting a picture of a person who's active, intervening, interceding on all these little small things. Two Jews arguing in the middle of a horrific situation. He sticks his nose in and says, "Stop it." God comes to him at the burning bush and says, "Moshe, you're the man. Let's go save the Jewish people." And Moshe says, "Find somebody else." How do you fit these pieces of the puzzle together? Does it make any sense? So the Medrash comes and says, what's the issue? Moshe was pleading with God and says, my brother Aaron is older than me. He has been the de facto leader of the Jewish people now for his entire life. Why are you appointing me to intrude on his position amongst the Jewish people? And the Medrash uses an amazing word. It's Medrash Yalkut Shimoni. It says you're crossing his boundary. It would be like if I have an olive grove and you have an olive grove, and in the middle of the night I sneak in and I say, "Ooh, this tree is giving a lot of olives. I'm going to move my fence 5 feet to the left so it'll circle your tree." That's what we call breaking somebody's gavul, breaking a boundary, and has a curse attached to it in the Torah. Moshe's sensitivity for the feelings of his older brother Aaron ran so deep, he could literally look God in the face and say, I want nothing more than for the Jewish people to be redeemed. I was sitting in Paro's house where they waited on me hand and foot. Okay, if my had an ingrown toenail, they sent 5 doctors to take care of me. But I went out and I looked at the suffering of the Jewish people and I intervened to say, I risked my life to save one Jewish life. And then I risked my future again by intervening with these 2 Jews. Now Moshe is telling him, find somebody else? No. Moshe is saying, in my way of evaluating the world, I have no right to interfere or to take away my older brother's status within the Jewish people. And he would not have gone. But how does God respond to him? Your brother Aaron is coming, and he's coming with a full heart. It's not just that he's going to say, it's okay, Moshe, you can run the Jewish people. I'll step aside. I'll become vice president. I'll be happy to be the Kohen Gadol. You can be the leader. No, none of that. God has to tell him that Aaron's purity of heart, his feelings, that's what the Yalkut Shimoni says. The beautiful discussion of this by Rabbi Moshe Chait given in Jerusalem about 38 years ago. Moshe has to be reassured that with a whole heart, Aaron is going out to greet him, and Aaron is going to welcome him as the redeemer of the Jewish people without reservation. What's the outcome of this? Aaron does come. And God, looking at the purity of Aaron's heart as an individual, what does God decide? This is the chest where the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol will rest, and the Urim V'Tumim, the special intermediary, so to speak, that can bring down God's wisdom into the world when no one's able to figure it out, because that's what the Urim V'Tumim was used for. Anybody who wanted to go to, where's the Urim V'Tumim, Yale or Harvard? Now I don't remember. It's the Yale. It's the symbol of Yale University, right? And it's in Hebrew, or it says Urim V'Tumim. So, anybody who did go to Yale or was an aspiring Yalie, we know that more presidents of the United States are Yale graduates than any other university in the world or ever. So that's what Aaron earned. How did he earn it? He didn't earn it by any great action. He earned it by simply saying that if I understand that God is appointing my younger brother to lead the Jewish people and redeem the people, I'm all in. I have no reservations. My heart is at rest and at peace with that. So again, what do we see? Small stuff, internal things that aren't even, the naked eye can't even see them or perceive them. But this spells all the difference in the world. And that's where the Urim V'Tumim comes from. And I'll just say dramatically at the very end of the Parsha, because the Parsha really ends on what seems like a pretty rough note. After Moshe is there, he approaches Paro, he's getting no place. Paro doubles down, makes life more difficult for the Jewish people. So Moshe is bereft. And Moshe says to God, Lama pareosa la'am hazeh. Okay, it's chapter 5, sentence 22. Moshe turns to God and says, why are you doing wrong to the Jewish people? Okay, so Moshe is troubled that his motivation to intercede in a good way is failing. And the word lama always means for what purpose. And God responds to him. And what does God say? Atah tireh, now you will see retribution to Paro. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch again says here that it was only Moshe reaching this moment where he was tremendously sympathetic for the plight of the Jewish people, and he felt powerless to make a difference as an individual. Then God says, okay, if you've reached that point of sincerity where you're really turning over the responsibility to me, now you will see the redemption begin. And indeed, next week we're going to start with the 7 of the 10 plagues, and the story picks up, and the Hollywood cameras start rolling because we have phenomena that are astounding to see and catch everybody's attention. But in this entire parsha, the groundwork for the whole book of redemption of the Jewish people, what we're really seeing is seismographically delicate sentiments and choices within the hearts of individual people that really spell all the difference. And a couple of quotes here, and we'll conclude the class. Then the idea of why small stuff matters, because in the world at large, my brother feels badly, I'm getting a promotion, I can have more good, I can earn more money, I'm supposed to worry that I'm taking something away from him. In each of these situations, or I'm the Prince of Egypt, I'm supposed to worry about one poor Jew getting killed. I got bigger fish to fry, so to speak. That's not the way God sees the world. That's if God had wanted a world like that, God would have made one dramatic pronouncement and everything would have come into being. But instead, God wants us to focus on the steps involved, the small stuff of everyday living. And in the Sefer Derech Hashem, Reb Moshe Chaim Luzzatto says that God's intention in creating the world, these are the words he uses, they're very surprising words to me, that we human beings should be poneh libo el Hashem tamid. We should be mindful of God at all times. That's an astounding statement. That's the purpose of creation. Okay, he writes it different ways in a few different places, but this to me boils it down to the essence. So God spoke 10 distinct pronouncements to create the universe, so that when we turn our hearts to God and we look to do things that fulfill, that validate the creation that God has made, we're fulfilling the purpose of the world. And I want to reference something here. This is a dangerous thing for me to say. And I'm really expecting that this, we're not all sitting together in a quiet room where there'll be no deniability. But this Shabbos in Shul, Rabbi Michal Tversky should live and be well. He referenced the sentence in the Torah, which said, where Jacob says, I conquered the world, becharbi ubekashti, with my sword and with my bow and arrow. Those are the words that he used. And how did the rabbis understand it? How do we translate? With his prayer. With his prayer. Now, of course, we're standing at this moment in time where we are so thankful to every individual member of the IDF who's defended us for the last 2 years. We're awestruck by the unbelievable show of power. I think it's a big mistake, but Netanyahu recently said, and I always get nervous when people make these pronouncements to the world, says Israel's now a superpower, he said. Not the kind of thing that I think Jewish people should be proclaiming to the world, because it certainly just, pulls their chain and makes them, that much more determined and resolved to get rid of us. But what Reb Michal Twersky should live and be well said in Shul was that each and every one of us who opened up a psalm and said a prayer, and certainly each of us who redoubled our efforts to be kind to other people or to study Torah or to fulfill the Torah in some way, we're part of the power structure that determined or that enabled the Jewish people to overcome what seemed like such incredible odds less than 2 years ago. When they described the idea, that it's Hamas and it's Hezbollah and it's the Houthis and it's Iran and the complete encirclement of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And we can document amazing with great loss and with great pain and suffering. And certainly there are many people who will be spending the rest of their lives who are still alive who are going to have a hard time with what we're saying here. But we saw the Jewish people being redeemed and being saved. And as excited as we are when we see an Israeli soldier, and as thankful as we are to them, we can also include ourselves through our prayer, through our good deeds, through our study of Torah, through our being more mindful than ever that we are one Jewish people that are responsible for one another. We also can feel as though we're part of this achievement. And indeed, like any time a great achievement happens, the people who care the most don't argue over whose effort made the biggest difference. But we should really sincerely understand that when it comes to free choice, when it comes to human emotion, when it comes to the Jewish people prevailing for yet another generation, there's a lot of small, imperceptible moments and feelings and actions that could never be noticed by anybody else other than God Almighty, and God notices all of them. And please God, we should all continue doing our part to see to it that the Jewish people prevail in every way.